Okay, guys. I spend seconds upon seconds, sometimes minutes even, thinking about how to intro this show. And I have nothing.
Nope. That's a first.
So this is an intro.
This is an intro. This is a first intro. Nice haircut. I like your haircut.
Thank you.
Yeah. Looks
Happened
good.
like a week ago,
Oh,
I think.
That looks good.
Yeah. That's what happens is it just grows and grows and grows, and then all of a sudden it's just way gone. And so, yeah.
Yeah, but I can see your eyes now, so
Okay. Look, I don't think I've ever had hair that bad.
no, yeah, I'm just teasing you.
Uh-huh. That's
Yeah.
what I thought. Rude.
Yes, that was rude. But you can handle it because you're not a woke little baby.
Oh, pff.
Are you? Yeah. That's what I thought. Remember
That
those
was probably really loud.
It was. Those mics are very sensitive. Yes. Yeah.
Ooh. Oh, I thought that made a ding.
It did make a ding. I heard it, but I don't know what you hit, but it wasn't that mic. Oh, there you go. Hit it again. No, don't. People are listening. This is hitting your...
can ring my bell.
Oh,
Ring my bell.
Welcome back, everybody.
Breaking Woke Podcast. My hand is gone.
Yes,
It's
can't
out of
see
frame.
it. I'm not Gavin Waples.
And I'm not Pep Waples.
You're Gavin Waples,
And he's Pep Waples.
and we are
Shifting culture.
and Breaking Woke.
The Spirit of the Lord says, do you feel the winds of change? For I am releasing my hand, my anointing, that shall break the yoke of woke.
That was weird. Whatever, man. Whatever.
Okay, well, we're back anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're doing a podcast.
We are doing
and
a
you're
podcast.
listening to it.
Yeah. A couple weeks, we talked about on one of the podcasts about what we shared in our kitchen.
We did? We talked about that?
Well, kind of. We briefly touched on it. You said, oh, we'll talk about that on another episode.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, should we talk about some of that?
We should lay some groundwork.
Okay, lay the groundwork.
Okay. Well, obviously, well, I'm not the. Okay.
You're not the what?
I don't know. This is weird. I'm not
Okay,
usually
so
the one to start things off. So,
Well-
let me get a practice run. Okay.
Practice run? You don't get a practice run.
Practice run of this. Okay. So we're talking about breaking woke, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Putting skin
I
on
failed
it.
the practice run.
You did. It's all right. You're the editor, so you can also put something in there fancy if you want to.
No.
Yeah.
It's
No.
a lot.
We're just talking about what it looks like. We want to know where people, I think people want to know where, even how I dealt with some things,
Yeah.
because people are going through stuff and they need to know that there's healing, there's a way out, there's help.
Or if maybe it's not you, you need to know how to help someone.
Yeah, that
in
is.
that.
Yeah, because the people around me sometimes just look at me perplexed. Mm-hmm. Your mom in particular at times like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, nothing wrong with me. Okay. And she didn't know what to do and she'd walk away. Anyways, I feel sorry for your mom sometimes.
Yeah. But a lot of it came out of behaviors you developed from these things, right?
Yeah, from brokenness. I'm going to shout out to Joe Phelan, because we've talked on some conversation before, and he made a statement one time. I thought it was just, I'm going to keep using it. I told him I'm going to steal it, so I'm going to keep stealing it. But we were talking about a person who had kind of went off on me about some stuff, and I was a little frustrated by it. Like, man, I've helped this person, and they went off on me, and I was telling Joe about it, and he goes, just real quiet. And he goes, everybody breaks differently, don't they, Pep? And I mean, those words affected me because immediately when he said that, I saw all these different like teacups in my mind's eye. I saw all these little different teacups that had been dropped, and every one of them were broke in different pieces.
Yeah.
And that was really profound for me. So, I've kept that, and it's helped me to relate to people, look at people, talk to people, understand where they are, because people who've gone through trauma of any kind break in one way or another.
And someone's sharp edges aren't always the other person's sharp edges.
Right. And some people that are really broken, they don't hold much. Mm-hmm. You can put a cup back together, but it doesn't hold a whole lot, or it'll leak. You know what I'm saying? If you picture a teacup and you try to put all the pieces back together, there might be a little piece that seems to be missing that kind of leaks out, And when he said everyone breaks differently, I thought, oh, wow, that's true.
Yeah.
They broke different than me. That person they broke different than me. Mm-hmm. They were probably a little more shattered than me, at least in that area. And so talking about some of this stuff, I think, if it can help someone understand someone else,
Yeah.
That might have gone through some things, because people don't ever, especially people who've been through legitimate trauma, and when I say legitimate, there are people who've made some things up that just, there are some fakers,
Yeah.
Out there. Anyway, not going there.
But there are real people, and
Right.
more often than not, the real people don't show a lot of their trauma, or at least overtly talk about it.
Well, here's a word that gets thrown out a lot, but it's legitimate. I don't like it because of the word, and it's the word triggered.
Yeah.
It triggers this or it triggered that. The word trigger is for real. It's a real deal. Mm-hmm. What it does is it sets something off in a person that is trauma related.
Right.
So I understand the term triggered. It just has gotten so overused that it's hard for me to, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
Was it really a trigger, or are you just upset?
Right.
Because there are some things that can trigger, and you don't, for the person who's gone through trauma, it is a panic mode on what to do, how to, get out of it.
Because it kind of brings them back to default trauma settings of defense, escape, run away.
Yeah, fight or flight kind of stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I didn't even know about this stuff. I experienced it a lot in my life. The fight or flight stuff, most of mine was flight. I didn't want to fight.
Really?
I wanted flight, because I had fought in other situations, and I just wanted to get away from pain.
Huh.
Yeah, it's weird. Give you an example. Before me and your mom were married, she's always been fun to be around, and we'd poke at each other, and sometimes, just being around, she'd, punch me in the arm when I did something stupid, and it'd be no big deal. We were in, just the way that was just our relationship. I'd be, like I'd tickle your sister, and she wants to hit me so bad, but she won't because I'm her dad, right? Well, your mom would have punched me, not in the face, but in the arm, like, you leave me alone, kind of thing. So it was one of those moments. We were, I had said something, whatever, and I don't remember how it all went, but somehow the conversation, I was not in a mental state where I was ready for that kind of interaction. And she punched me, and I just got mad. And she's like, whoa. Because it wasn't, she's like, what's up with you? And I realized that I had instantly reacted.
Yeah.
And I just started crying, and I just said, I just don't want to hurt anymore. Because there had been some things that happening in my life. And at that time, I think I was going through the divorce. And the kids, weren't being able to come around, and then dealing with the opposition, if you will, and then the trauma on top of that of, being abused as a kid, all that stuff. It was one of those days where it all piled on.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So when she hit me, and it wasn't even hard, it was just a kind of a punch in the leg kind of thing. It wouldn't even have left a bruise,
Right. Mm-hmm.
But when I got mad and she went, whoa, and it just broke in me. I'm like, I just don't want to hurt anymore. And I just started crying. You know, she didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, that I'm sure somebody else has probably experienced something similar. You know, just talking to somebody and they snap for whatever reason, whether it's
Yes.
anger or emotion. You know, I think a lot of times with guys, it's usually more anger or
Yeah.
whatever, and many times with girls, it's emotion, which can be anger, I guess. But yeah, and maybe
Snap is a good word.
yeah.
Or break. Break is another good word.
Because it would seem like if you think about like a stick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at it, it looks fairly normal up until it's suddenly not,
Mm-hmm.
and then it all crashes. You know, and so I think sometimes people. I hate to say this because it seems overused. You don't know what someone's going through, you know, but you can look at someone and they can look like they're handling things okay, you know, but that's just because they're used to the pressure at that point.
Yep.
You know, you think of like a board that's really bowed, you know, it's bowed because it was used to pressure, you know, but it wouldn't take much for that thing to snap,
Right.
you know.
Right. You know, that brings me to another thing. You know, when I was, as me and your mom began to develop a friendship and then into a relationship, the more time we spent together, I started realizing, you know, there were some things that happened in our interaction that I tilted my head as like, that's weird, and vice versa. What was normal to her was not normal to me, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You know, that's not normal to me. You know, I guess, for example, to kind of get into this, because this is all, you know, when I'm talking about some things that for me were normal, a fight between two people was normal. If you had a disagreement and it came to blows, man, that's just the way it goes. It's just normal.
You like fisticuffs.
Fisticuffs, yeah.
Wow.
That's just normal. You know, I spent a lot of time with uncles, and man, they had all kinds of fights. I mean,
Fist fights.
not just fist fights, sticks, knives, you know,
Wow.
shovel. One was a shovel, whatever's in their hand. You know, sometimes they beat each other. You know, it's just kind of how I grew up. So
This is the same side of the family as the whack job, right?
yeah, the whack job. We'll just call him prison pedo. How's that? Prison pedo.
Yeah.
Or what's one of the, yeah, anyway, prison pedo.
Okay.
He's in prison now, but yeah, but those guys, you know, man, it was a nightmare growing up. But for me growing up in that, it became normal. Like that's just how life was.
Learning to live in that kind of environment.
You learn to live in fear. You learn to operate in fear. You learn to function in fear. You sleep in fear. You eat in fear. You watch TV in fear.
Because something could just happen.
Any moment. You know, just because somebody was entertained by your pain.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
sadistic.
It is. But that's the difference between light and dark. You know, your mom grew up after your grandpa got born again. She was still a kid, you know, so she didn't get to experience like the alcohol and stuff that your grandpa talks about, you know, being in the bars and being a bartender, that kind of thing. She grew up, she got to see him early on when things were, you know, but for the most part of her childhood, it was in church and growing up in church and going to church. And so she saw good people for the most part. For me, it wasn't that way. You know, everything was fear. You know, even when relatives would come, they grew up in darkness too, and a lot of them were the same way. It was just a bigger tribe of chaos. You know, so talking about, you know, growing up, you know, one of the things I shared with you guys that was normal was, you know, I watched one uncle. We'll just call, I don't know what I should call him. Normal.
Normal.
He's a good guy. I like this guy, but he was making fun of another one who's crazy because he couldn't figure out how to get the car running. And so he's got his hand on the battery, and one his left hand is up near the front door of the car, and his
Normal or crazy?
Normal had his hand on the car like door and one hand on the battery. So Normal was there with his hand on the battery, and Crazy was at the front of the car, like where the headlights are, trying to figure out what's going on because he'd been trying to get this car running. And the other one's laughing at him, poking fun at him, and all of a sudden, Crazy had a knife in his hand. He just took the knife and stabbed it right through the hand of Normal and stuck it to the battery. And so he's sitting there screaming, ah, and I witnessed the whole thing. I'm watching it. I'm like, whoa. I mean, and then the Crazy, he just took pleasure in it, like, laugh again. It was,
Wow.
keep laughing.
That's sick.
And walked away. Left the guy with the knife stuck to the battery in his hand. Now, Normal just took the knife out of his hand and threw it down, and then he's sitting there looking at his hand with the hole in it. He's Well, then his parents, my grandparents, they didn't do anything. They walked in the house and cleaned it up, put a Band-Aid on it. That was it. That was just how things went.
Whoa.
So growing up in that, there's it creates a thought pattern and types of behavior that to you seem normal, but to those who are walking in light, it is abnormal. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn what normal is.
Right.
Coming out of it, there were some things you just knew were wrong, but you didn't know why, because nobody in my family went to church.
Oh, yeah.
Closest thing to God was a picture of Jesus on the wall.
Oh.
And it was a weird picture. It was one of those ones that changed, so like, how you see those pictures where you have, like Anakin, and then on one angle it turns to Vader,
Oh, yeah.
the weird changing pictures like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I like those.
yeah. Well, this one had a picture of like Jesus, and he was walking on water.
Oh.
So you'd turn and he'd walk on water. So Jesus that was his only involvement in the household that I grew up in, was a picture on the wall. Nobody really knew about Jesus or went to church or talked, it was just crazy stuff. So learning how to function, in life. So, cause I came from, it was a divorced home. So when my dad's second divorce, I ended up going and living with my mom. And so I had to deal with that side of the family. So as a kid, early on with my dad, my grandma and my dad, they kept things pretty, what I would call what was really normal.
Your grandma on which?
On my dad's side.
Oh, okay.
She was actually the light for my life as a kid. She, when I first knew her, there was joy. When we would go over there, she always made sure we had chocolate milk and graham crackers. She made things special. Mm-hmm. That was the way she did. It was, like she would open a can of those little mandarin oranges,
yeah.
And so we'd have mandarin oranges, graham crackers, chocolate milk. She just made the days special. Mm-hmm. That's who she was. And that was light, And honestly, I give credit to her because as things got darker in my life, she was the only evidence of God that I could see.
Wow.
If it wasn't for her, I don't know that I would have believed in God, because she was literally she was an angel to me. She brought life to me. When we spent time with her on that side of things, because after my dad's divorce, he, went to work and, but my grandma on my dad's side really wanted to see us all the time, because she was, so when we'd go see her, she brought life to us. Mm-hmm. And she was the one that when things first happened to me, as far as abuse goes, the sexual abuse, after that, when I went and saw her, she knew immediately when she looked into my eyes that something was wrong.
Wow.
So I haven't talked about this, but I'm writing it out, but she looked at me and her face literally just broke. And she's like, oh, the look on her face was, oh no. Mm-hmm. That was the look. She didn't say that. And then she just hugged me. And on the inside, I'm screaming. I wanted, you need to know, I need to tell you, I'm screaming, on the inside. But for some reason, I could not get it out my mouth.
Wow.
So she knew something had happened to me as a kid, but she didn't know what had happened to me. And on the inside, it was literally like I was looking through a window I don't know if you've ever seen those movies where somebody's on the other side, on one side they're screaming, you can hear their screams and they're pounding, and you can hear
Like Interstellar.
Interstellar.
Yeah, think about like when Matthew McConaughey.
when he's on behind the bookshelf.
Yeah.
Most people haven't seen that show, but
I feel like there's a lot of people who have seen Interstellar.
I doubt it. You're the movie guy. We're kind of movie
Interstellar
people.
is a good movie that I feel like a lot of people have seen.
Yeah, maybe not. But
If you
either way,
haven't watched it, it's good. Okay, it's a good movie.
Good is relative. Anyway, I wasn't that entertained by the show, but he digressed.
You have to have more than 10 brain cells to like the show, so there's that. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry if you hate Interstellar. You're wrong. It's okay.
So
But there's a
anyway.
scene in Interstellar where he's behind like this space-time bookshelf and he's screaming at his kid.
Yeah, he's screaming at his kid, and even there's one
Screaming
movie
to get his kid's attention. I
right,
guess.
and he can hear himself, and you can even hear like the
Yeah.
on his side, but on the other side, nothing,
Right.
totally muted, and they're just going about their life, and that's how I felt as a kid. Like I'm screaming, on the inside, but this shell that was now created as a cell, a prison cell, was not allowing those sounds to come out. And I was so broken, and that's how things started for me. And that's where normal for me began to be. It's what everyone else's abnormal was. Normal behavior for me was now all trauma related.
Wow.
And I didn't know how to function because I spent a majority of my time with those crazy guys that, putting knives in each other's hands. That same uncle, the normal, I'll just call him normal. And he's got some own issues that were caused, the poor guy. Anyway, there was another time, I don't know why he was always the object of aggression.
Probably because he was normal.
Could have been, I guess, just looking at it. But there was another time that Prison Pedo tried to kill him, his own brother. So Prison Pedo tried to kill him with a shovel, a spade shovel. It's a garden shovel. Swung it, tried to hit him in the throat, purposely tried to hit him in the throat, ended up hitting him in the mouth and cut his mouth wide open. He has a scar to this day because of it. Those were the kinds of things that happened all the time around me. So always growing up in fear, always growing up what's around the corner, and then out of that too were created supernatural evil things always happen too around that.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about how there's a kingdom of light and a kingdom of darkness, and they're both very real. As a kid, the things I experienced because of the kingdom of darkness have now made the kingdom of light even more real for me. Because I've seen what happens in the kingdom of darkness. I remember one time, as a kid, it was a really small house, but everybody gathered together. I think my grandparents had a total of 15 kids.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That's a lot of kids.
Yeah. So when the older ones were at home with their kids for any kind of a gathering in a 900 square foot house, which is really small, you'd have upwards of 30 people there.
Wow.
Because you have their their significant other, I wouldn't say spouse, but significant other. And if they had kids, the house was full. So whenever dishes were done, everything was done by hand. And so in this kitchen, everything was piled up, and you had Tupperware cups, that were just plastic cups and pans. Everything was stacked on the counter. So one night we were in the living room, which was adjacent to the kitchen, one little doorway opening it, or that was open. So it was late at night, and all of a sudden we heard all those dishes hit the floor. I mean, just came crashing down. The pans, you could hear the pans hit the floor. You could hear the cups rolling. The whole, and they rolled up.
Yeah.
It just rolls across the floor. The pans hitting, and all of us. I don't know how many of us were in the living room. Not very many, because most people were asleep because it was around midnight. And there was I'll say 6 or 7 of us. We jumped up. We ran into the kitchen. And I don't remember who it was, flipped on the light, but we flipped on the light, and there was not a thing out of place. All the dishes were still on the counter.
Oh, wow.
We were all just freaked out, but it's darkness. And that's the things that people need to understand, is that darkness does affect or the supernatural darkness and the supernatural light. They will affect natural things, and we were living in it.
Right. That was the actual sound you heard.
It was an actual
spiritual
sound. It was so weird. It was 7 people heard it. All of us heard it at the same time. And what I'm saying is this is a result of walking away from God. A family that doesn't serve God. The only image of God was a cross on one wall and a reflective picture of Jesus on the other wall. But nobody talked to him. Nobody served him.
Yeah.
You
could almost say that was like a token to try and ward that off, maybe.
What it reminds me of is like in the Old Testament. To try and ward off evil. It was just an idol, is what it was. But like in the Old Testament, how it talks about, the children of God served Baals, served Ishtars, they served them. So you have people that have a knowledge of God, but their actions are serving evil.
Right.
That's what I grew up in.
Which is actually, I would argue, is worse.
It is.
And carries a worse consequence, I would think.
Yeah, you think you're okay, but you're not. Yeah, you're not. So growing up in that, and then, because that's where the sexual abuse for me started, was right there with prison pedo. That I went from a good household where my grandma would bring graham crackers and chocolate milk to a place now where, I'll never forget the first night I spent there, and the first night things happened. I was so scared. I was freaked out because it was a very poor atmosphere. They had the main house where the heat and everything was, and then directly next to that was a little tiny trailer house. And I mean tiny, not much bigger than most people's trailers. And that's where most of the boys slept. And because I was a boy, you got thrown out there. There was no heater. It was strict. It was cold. It was full of mice. It stunk. It was dirty. I didn't know any of that. I came from clean haircuts, and my dad made sure we had haircuts all the time. I mean, we were, now here I am thrown into this stuff. I didn't know how to react. It was complete darkness. And that first night was when that guy abused us, or abused me. And I didn't know what to do from there. Everything that night, that's when the shattering stopped. That's when everything broke in me, or started to. I got mad because the next day, after it happened, I was thinking about this as a kid. I'm like, he was wrong. I need to tell on him. That was I'm going to tell on him.
How old was that?
Probably 6 or 7.
Wow.
Something like that. 7 maybe. Trying to think. Yeah, I think it was around. It's probably 7. I think I was just out of kindergarten or somewhere in there. I don't remember exact age. I was pretty young. But I remember, all I remember is I was little and he was taller than me. And he's really short, actually. As a grown adult, he's very short. So he wasn't very big then, so I was pretty little. But I remember going up to him the next day and said, I'm going to tell on you. And he turned it on me. He turned and he looked at me. He says, I'm just going to tell him it was your fault and it was your idea. And as a little kid, I'll never forget, that was the moment I shouldn't say literally, but it felt like someone come up and just put shackles on my hands and feet. That second, I became a prisoner. That's when everything broke. When we talk about how the scripture says he came to heal the brokenhearted, one of the things we looked at in that definition of the broken was somebody's seat of knowledge and do I have it? I don't have it. Their what they base their decisions on, their ability to have determination and will, to go forward.
Yeah.
All of that broke at that second. That's when it broke. So there's something about sexual trauma. I still don't have it figured out. And I know there's psychologists that might know a few things, but they don't know it all either.
Right.
There's something about the damage to a child that is so destructive. It takes, some people never recover from it in their lifetime. And without the healing power of God in their life, never will.
Right.
there's something about it. Because there's things that now, even talking about this and going down this road, that as I move forward, I'm seeing things that were broken that now God is restoring. God is healing. God is helping. And because of that, I'm able to look, I look at some people, I'm like, that person's been hurt. It's kind of strange. It's like there's, a new set of glasses. I can spot people who've been broken.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's pattern recognition.
I think it's more than that. I think, not that, please don't take this wrong, because God doesn't make us go through things or allow us to go through things so that we can be a help to other people. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that. I think that what we go through, he turns for good.
Right. That's what the scripture says.
Right. We're born into this broken world.
Right.
Right? He has a plan from the very beginning. He doesn't want us to go through certain things. If we follow him, we can avoid the dangers that are in this earth. We can avoid them. Mm-hmm. So what I went through, though, God will use to help other people, and because of that, there is an anointing on my life. The presence of God will turn on a light to say, pay attention to that. Mm-hmm. For example, they're not just people who've been hurt. There's people that I can see, I'm like, don't trust that person. Something in me that don't trust them. No, it's not everywhere. It's not, You know what I'm saying? It's not like, but I've had certain interactions with adult men. And I'm like, something's wrong here.
Yeah, that just happened just a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, actually it did. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and yeah.
And when we come to find out, the guy is on a registry. He's on a sex registry. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're talking about this other incident?
No, that's the one I was talking about.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I've learned to just pay attention to that. Not that I treat them differently or anything like that. Well, the one who's on the registry, I will. I don't want anything. Stay away from me.
Yeah.
Stay away from me. But the other guy that I don't have proof on, if I just have a gut feeling, now I'm watching like, something's off.
Right.
Something's off. And sometimes you just got to trust that. It doesn't mean you have to point the finger and say they are this. Pay attention to your on the inside. You gotta watch that, especially with kids. Growing up, going to a daycare, teachers, whatever. Just watch. Trust your gut.
Right. But I think that's even important, not necessarily on a danger level, but on a like a lot of people, if somebody were to like with mom, like what happened to you with mom, if somebody were to just react or just flare up or snap or whatever, immediately you'd go into, well, they were wrong, so I'm gonna deal with that. I'm gonna separate myself, or I'm gonna tell them they were wrong, or I'm gonna get them in trouble, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Maybe that needs to be done, but take a look and figure out, consider, is there something deeper going on here?
Right. Okay. So yeah, going back to that, a lot of the things that happened when that happened to me as a kid, those things that were broken, now it caused me to react to some things in a different way than it was trauma reacting.
Mm-hmm. Not a normal person reaction.
So now that turned into, because what happened is when that seat was destroyed for me at that moment, vision was lost, my identity was taken away, stolen, truth was taken from me, security was taken from me, any kind of safety, all of it was gone, immediately destroyed. I had to start over. So now you get raised up in that, and fear is a constant thing, which causes now an immediate tension about everything. So when you're sitting there and you think you're safe, all of a sudden something snaps. Now you react.
Right.
And that grew with me my whole life. My whole life. So one time, I was down at Bible school, and I was over at your mom's apartment, and she had her brother and sister were there. It was the summer, and so Terry was there for the summer, and Rusty had moved down, and I forget how this. Oh, well, Rusty was sleeping in. I don't know if he was working late or what, but he was sleeping in, and he got up to go get some cereal, and somehow him and Terry got into it over something. I don't remember what it was, and they were exchanging words. It wasn't violent, but because of the way I grew up. And I remember, normal guy got a knife stuck in his hand over a comment, right? So that's, now the tension is rising in me because that was how I grew up. When somebody was in a fight, you didn't know what was going to happen. Somebody was going to end up in blood. It was not good. You could be drawn into it. I mean, because it always ended up one or two people, and then it was a brawl. I mean, it was just stupid. It was chaos. So anyway, your mom and Terry and Rusty were up, and somehow Rusty and Terry started exchanging words, and then your mom's like, knock it off, this and that, and she got in the middle of it. Now all three of them are back and forth, and it was a yelling match, and in my mind, I'm like, whoa, what's going to happen? I'm in the middle of this. What's going to happen next? Is Rusty going to come at me? And I'm sizing this whole situation up. Well, if he comes at me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and then all of a sudden Terry runs off and Brandy runs off, and Terry was crying, and they both go in the other room, and Rusty just casually walks over to the fridge, comes up with his bowl of cereal and sits on the couch and says, you want some cereal? And in my heart's racing. I'm like, okay. And he goes back to eating. And I don't know if the TV was on or what. He just goes back to eating. All of a sudden, your mom and Terry come out of the room, and I thought, here it comes again. It's a tense moment for me. I'm like, ugh. Yeah. They come out, each one of them on either side of Rusty, and they start kissing him on the cheek and hugging him. Oh, we love you, Rusty. And he's sitting there eating his cereal. He didn't move. Yeah. He just eats his cereal. And I just went tilt. And all of a sudden, Brandy looks over at me, and she goes, what's wrong with you? So it must have been all over my face. I went, nothing, I got to go. And I got up and left. She was shocked. Because, I don't know, we had planned something. I don't remember what it was. We weren't dating. We were just going to go hang out. But I left. My emotions just tipped over because what I thought was going to happen didn't happen. It was completely de-escalated for them, but not for me. My emotions were clear up here, and then nothing happened.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to handle it. There's a lot of people out there like that. When you see someone who's gone through an issue, whether it's sexual abuse or other trauma, whether they've lost someone in a car accident or whatever, maybe they witnessed it, it breaks something.
Yeah.
And now their normal is not your normal anymore.
Yeah.
Their normal is completely different. Now, it's brokenness that can be whole, it can be healed, and it can become right again.
Right, but yeah, it takes Jesus.
It takes Jesus, and it takes people who don't react to.
Right, yeah.
That's the difficult part. There's a lot of people who've been hurt that react, then the other person does not, well, you're rude. Don't talk to me like that. Man, you're a jerk, whatever,
Right.
And they won't help them. It's not a help at all.
It just continues a cycle.
It does. It can continue a cycle, but most of the time what happens is that person becomes more and more isolated.
Yeah.
And I was on my way to that. I was on my way to becoming more and more isolated. But the more I hung out with Terry and Rusty and your mom, I started seeing things that were different, and it intrigued me. Like, wait a minute, I don't understand this. Because I didn't grow up that way. Everything in my life ended up in a conflict.
Right, yeah.
Because that's what happens in darkness. It's chaos, and that's what happened with me. So, but it stemmed from brokenness that happened when I was a kid.
Right. That's what happens when darkness is allowed in, though. It affects more than just what it's told it can touch.
Exactly. You don't have any control. Once you open the gate, it's a floodgate.
Yeah.
And I grew up in that. I witnessed it. I watched these things. People would get hurt all the time here's a weird thing. Okay. When you talk about the darkness that takes over, something that is not normal. There's a story in the Bible where these demons went into pigs after Jesus cast them out of the demoniac, right? And the pigs went nuts and drowned themselves in the water, right? So you see a spiritual result. Like Jesus took care of a spiritual situation, but you're seeing it in the natural.
Yeah. And then the pig, So to everyone else, they just saw the pigs go crazy and run into the ocean.
Yeah, they didn't know. Whoa, that was weird. The pigs just drowned themselves. Whoa,
Yeah.
And the whole city was freaked out by that, right? So, for me, one of the things that happened. I mean, some of these guys, they were so mean, even to animals. I watched. There was a barn that had 2 levels. It was built into the side of the hill, and on the upper level was a hayloft, and then there was a big opening, a huge opening, and another hayloft on the other side, and it was probably about 12 feet wide, the opening, and there was a plank that went to the other hayloft. And at the top of the one hayloft, there was a door that opened to the top of the hill. So in the bottom of the barn was it was open to the other side because it was built into a hill, and that's where anyway, these guys would bring this milk cow. And they brought the milk cow in, and they were so mean to this cow, they would literally, which was so dumb, they would torment this cow before they milked it. Poke it at it, be mean, hit it with a hot shot, just buzz it, just to get a laugh.
What the heck?
And just to hear the cow go, boo, and then run from her as they're trying to hit her, she's chasing them, and they jump over the fence in time, and then they go back in with a hot shot, and then finally get the cow's head strapped in the thing so they could milk her, and then they'd milk her, and then prod her with the hot shot while she's got her head stuck in the thing.
Oh my gosh.
They were so mean to this cow. So what you're seeing is the result of darkness, demonic activity in a natural realm, right? Yeah. But so I'm sitting up on these little steps. They're only about, I don't know, not quite, maybe 18 inches wide. That went up to the hayloft. And on one side, it went up the hayloft, but on the other side, there's 2 areas that were kind of these small rooms where they stored grain. They were empty. It's kind of hard to picture. I get it. But anyway, I was sitting on the steps. So just put it that way. So I was on the steps where you could see the corral, and they got this cow. They're just torturing it, running around after they've milked it. They're just mean. And this cow is hollering, and she tears off after one of these guys. And I'm sitting about halfway up these steps, and he comes running up the steps and jumps off into this bin. And she leaves him alone. Well, then he goes back down and does it again, torches this cow, and she does it again. She chases him. He does it again, runs up the steps and jumps off and escapes her. Well, then the third time, he goes and does this, and he comes running up the steps, and she keeps coming.
Up the steps?
Up the steps. We're talking 18 inches wide. He jumps off. The cow kept coming, so I ran up the steps and ran across the plank, and then I turned around, and there's another uncle. Somehow, I don't know, he must have been, maybe he was the same, I don't know where he came from. He's running from this cow, and I turn around just in time to see that cow take 2 steps onto this wood plank out in the open, chasing that guy.
Wow. After climbing the steps.
Totally unnatural.
Yeah.
Totally unnatural. But that's the effects of darkness on the life, of a human being. Mm-hmm. Not just humans, but even the animals. Here we have the kingdom of darkness. That's what I grew up in. That's where that evil, grew. It was without God. There was no God anywhere.
That's operating in the curse.
It's operating in the curse. I've often thought about that.
Yeah.
So the crazy thing is, somebody had because now we're like, how's the cow going to get down? The cow ain't going back down the steps.
Right.
Now you got this cow up on a wooden hayloft, could put her foot through the hayloft anytime, and mad. This cow is mad. The tail's whipping, back and forth, and she's bellowing, and we're like, nobody knows what to do. Somebody had the thought to go around the hill, go up the hill, open the door to the hillside, and she found the opening and went out. But that's what I grew up in. Constant fear, constant torment, constant just disaster everywhere. And so now when you get out of that and you see people like, the Phelan family, everybody has their own quirks.
Yeah.
Right? But theirs weren't like that.
Right.
Theirs were just normal, disagreements that could be settled with words. for the most part, but now I see that's the kind of darkness I grew up in. That's what festered this spiritual atmosphere that this guy grew in and thrived in. Mm-hmm. The prison pedo. There was, we found out later too, though, there was a guy, he should have been a prison pedo, but he didn't get caught, that he always creeped me out. And he was a relative that would drive. He was always drunk, always had alcohol in his breath, and was always bringing gifts to the kids, candy, whatever. And everyone he always creeped me out when I saw him. Now, I never had an issue with the guy, but I did find out later that he was a pedo too, And but anyway, trying to understand people who've gone through that kind of trauma, sometimes we go off of their reaction and we don't know how to help them.
Right.
If you, like you said, the term, you don't know what somebody's gone through, it's true. And there's some of the people that I grew up around that little area that weren't weird. There's only a handful of them in that group that are not good. But there's others that grew up in that are just completely traumatized to this day about some things and won't talk on certain things. Like right now, they would never listen to this podcast. Never, never, never. Mm-hmm. It would just bring back too much stuff. They couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So even talking about certain things can trigger. Again, I don't like that word.
Yeah.
I've talked about that before, but that's the one word that it sets people off. Like this, like you said, the twig that just snaps. Mm-hmm. The snap. How do you, as a person who is a born again believer, it's important that you look to the inside, pay attention, because if somebody reacted, you can even talk to God about it. Mm-hmm. God, what happened here? He'll help you help those people.
Right.
Because I don't know that your mom ever did that with me, but she was a very understanding person. She would listen. Mm-hmm. She'd be like, asking questions. Did I do something to offend you? And I'd say no. And after we started dating, it was funny because she was trying to figure out because I didn't even know how to express myself in certain ways.
What do you mean?
Like if something was bothered me, everything went internal.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Everything went internal. So my face just looked like I was mad. I didn't know how to express.
Yeah.
So your mom, after we started dating, she'd be like, okay, and she'd start going through a whole bunch of words. Are you agitated? No. Are you frustrated? No. Are you irritated? No. Start going through all these words. Are you angry? Well, maybe. Okay. She grabbed that word. Okay, so what made you angry? Was it me? No. Was it the dog? No. Was it? And she literally had to map a way for me to acknowledge what was going on.
Yeah, because you couldn't do it.
Because I couldn't do it. Yeah, it was weird. And she did that for, I don't know how long, quite a long time, maybe a year, where we'd have conversations and something was bugging me. She'd say, okay, what's up? I don't know. Because if I finally got to where I'd be like, I don't know. I can't, I don't know how to voice it. Well, is it this? Yeah, it's that, but I don't know. Well, what's going on? And she was, I guess you could say I went through therapy. Huh. It just dawned on me. Your mom was my therapist for a while.
Right.
But she helped me to map a way to express how I was feeling on the inside. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we need to do that with people that are broken. We just have to understand, we don't have to agree with them. We just have to understand, there's something wrong here.
Right. Because a lot of that stuff with the LGBT, all of that one I heard.
That one I heard too.
Most of the time you don't, but that one I heard. Anyways, a lot of times with the LGBT and all that stuff, it also springs from especially sexual trauma.
Yep, sexual trauma or even absence from a father.
Yeah, right. And there is brokenness from that.
Massive brokenness. Mm-hmm. Massive brokenness. Because when someone's identity is taken, whether it's abuse to a girl or a boy, it literally takes away who they are. Mm-hmm. That definition that I read before. I wish I should have brought it with me again today. But this seat where someone makes a decision from, it's literally like taking a chair and shattering it. There's no safe place for the person who's been abused because everything they thought was good has been destroyed. You know, we're born into this world with this idea of God, you know, whether you know him or not. The Bible says he gives light to every man coming into the world, right? So that light is there until darkness steals it or you give in to darkness.
Yeah.
You know, if you give in to sin, sin kills you. That's darkness.
Yeah.
You know, or someone takes away the innocence of a child, that is darkness killing the light of that person. You know, and it's hard for that person to get an identity. They don't know where they're from. So that's where they start searching, you know, so they go by what they feel. I've talked to some people that way. They go by what they feel. Well, I feel like I'm a boy in a girl's body. Well, I feel like I'm pansexual. Not really stuck on any person. I feel like we can, and it's always a feeling-based thing. You know, it's just sad.
But that is also, like you said, it's an absence of a father. It's an absence of it's an absence of someone to help you map, you know?
Map your life, because you have, you know, before you were formed in the womb, God knew you, right? That's what the scripture says. And so it's the job of the father to help us get on that pathway.
Right.
You know, I got to find the scripture in Proverbs.
And I think that's because God set man in the head of the home, right? In the leadership role.
Yep, leadership role.
And that's, like, if you think about an exploratory party, right? The leader is the one who's finding his way through the brush, you know, cutting your way through what's in the way and helping others to navigate through it.
Right. And that's how, as a father who is following God, we have God the Father to say, don't go this way or don't go that way, as the father, as the head. Which in turn, we can turn around to the family and say, guys, we can't do this, we can't go this way, because God has set the boundaries for this. When you have someone who's violated, all of that is shattered.
Right.
There are no boundaries. There is no direction. There is no pathway.
And you're left to figure it out.
And you're left to figure it out. If you have a father who's absent and can't show the boundaries, now you're left on your own to find your own way through the jungle. So I got to find this scripture in Proverbs. It talks about, here it is, Proverbs 1:8. It says, my son, hear the instruction of your father. He says, and do not forsake the law of your mother. So there's the family unit. There are things that, you know, both have to play here. And here's what it says they'll do. It says, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head. There will be, let's see here. Sorry about that. It says, and do not forsake the law of your mother, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. So it says, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. And then it goes on and on. But basically it says, this is what will guide you from all of that stuff. I'll just keep going here. It says, if they say, let us swallow them alive like Sheol and whole like those who go down to the pit, we shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill all our houses with all kinds of spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. So in other words, join me. What's happening in the LGBTQ community? You know, join us. We understand your hurt. These are people who don't have guidance from a father or a mother, or they, in some ways, that family has not followed God, so they let them go to their own fancies, their own way, their own feelings, and this is the result, right? I think it's Proverbs 6 that continues that same, there's a little more expounding on the instruction of the father. It says, do not forsake the instruction of your father, or the law of your mother, for it will be a graceful ornament around your neck. Oh yeah, here it is, verse 20. Proverbs 6:20 says, my son, keep your father's command and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you awake, they will speak with you. For the commandment is a lamp and the law a light. That's literally a visible, it gives you visibility in a dark world. When someone doesn't have a father in the household, or a father who doesn't follow God in the household, who's holding the light?
Right.
Nobody. That's what kids are trying to figure this out on their own. They're trying to figure out how to make this life work, and some people have just decided there is no God. I talked to one person here recently, and they just told me that, and their dad was not in their life. They just told me, I can't remember when I lost faith, but I just made a decision, there can't be anything. But then they said, but sometimes I think maybe there is, and then there's other times I don't know. That's a person who didn't have a dad in their life who carried a light, who carried a lamp, and said, let's go this direction. God said, let's do this. Let's go here. Or God spoke this into your life. I'm going to help you follow that. Because my job as a dad is not to say, okay, you need to be a wrestler like me, because I wrestled in high school. My job as a dad is to say, what has God called you to do? And now, if you have a dad in the home, okay, let's just say you have a dad in the home, and I say that loosely, who violates their own child.
Yeah.
They can't trust what that guy's carrying anymore.
Right.
Their whole world is a disaster now. That's what happened to me. My dad was out of the scene. Now darkness showed up in my life, and the person on my, not trying to throw my mom under the bus, just facts. She didn't follow God, so there was no light to follow. So it was nothing but darkness and torment and fear. That's what I had to go by. That's how I grew up. And so my identity was completely taken away because there was no light on who I was supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people like that, where there hasn't been light in a while, and they set their own light, their own mark,
Right.
their own direction.
Yep.
And especially if you're coming in contact with someone like that, it can be volatile, it can be dangerous when you try and tell them that it's wrong.
Right.
Because, well, they were told what was right, or that I think especially with the trauma. I think with the trauma, it's probably worse than if, say, there was just nobody there.
Yeah.
They just set their own way. But
Right.
when it comes out of trauma, I think it becomes an identity. When you try to take someone's identity, it messes with you. It messes with them. It feels like a violation.
Yeah, because what happens is, like a broken person, they will try to pick themselves back up.
Yeah.
And put the pieces back together, and some of them don't look right. The pieces aren't correct because you can't take that cup and put it back together because you weren't the potter.
Yeah.
God is the potter. He can put it back together. You can't. And so you have a person who's tried to put their life back together, and so what they know is it's fragile.
Right.
Because they've tried to put something there and it falls. Put it back and it falls. Put it back and it doesn't hold water, or whatever. It doesn't hold. And so it's very hard for them to let you be a part of their life because you might wreck it.
Right.
And that's the way it was for me too. I mean, there were some things I didn't want to. I would not go over to your grandparents' house sometimes after church because I knew I wasn't used to what was going on there. It was all good, but I couldn't handle it. My cup would tip over too easy.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready for what was in store there, even though I wanted it so bad. I wanted this. What they have, that's amazing, but it's too weird for me. Because the spirit of man yearns for that goodness. Spirit of man yearns for that family, but it's very difficult for a broken person to receive it, accept it, be around it because they don't want to get broke again. It's very difficult, and it takes a little time. So if you've got a broken person in your life, try to recognize it for what it is, and then pray. Just ask God, because sometimes it's just the right words. Sometimes it will help. You know, because even for me growing up, I mean, I couldn't stand hugs.
Really?
Couldn't handle it. Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a small thing, but
It's a small thing, but yeah, I would cringe at hugs. And you know, when you get saved in church, you know,
yeah, huggy people.
huggy people everywhere. Oh, I hate that. I would purposely sometimes come to church during worship so I wouldn't have to meet anybody at the door and get a hug.
I know some people like that.
I don't know, and I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why, other than the cup was too fragile, or it just, you know, for me, for many, many years, touch of any kind was don't touch me. I didn't want I didn't want you to touch me. I didn't care who it was.
Right.
Now, little kids, a little different. I could have a kid come up, hug me around the neck, no problem. No problem. You know, but an adult, stay away from me. I didn't trust them.
Yeah.
You know, kids were innocent. They just give you a hug, jump on the back of your neck, you know, no big deal. But adults, my mind always had an agenda. It's just the way I grew up because you couldn't trust anybody.
And it came from the brokenness.
It did. It came from the brokenness.
People live like that.
Yeah, everywhere. And it's difficult for some people to engage others because of the brokenness. You know, if we can be aware of that, we can be a bigger help for people.
Yeah. Because that's the goal. You know,
That is the goal.
you know, we don't just want to tell people they're wrong.
Right. We want them to be whole.
Right.
Because, you know, I've said this over and over about time. You know, I've often watched you and Riley and just wondered what I would have been like.
Yeah.
But the good news is I'll still be able to get there. I can still get there. I'll give you an example of something that happened even just today. You were running that around the house with the dog.
Yeah.
And he was chasing you. And I got so much fun out of that. I never would have before.
Wow.
It would have just been a numb moment. Like, just watch the dog chase the kid. No feeling in it. No joy in it. You know, but what does he do? The Bible says he restores my soul. Right?
You know, that's funny because I just saw a video the other day, and it's just a worldly relationship, you know, people. But this lady she went to a movie with her husband, and now it makes sense to me why he did this. But she got mad because he planned this date, and it was an unexpected movie. She hadn't seen anything about it and whatever, but she watched it and she really enjoyed it. And then they went to dinner afterwards, and she's just wanting to talk about this movie. And she's like, "Oh, it was so cool, and I'd never seen it, and I thought it was great." And she was telling him this, and he was just like, and he went, "It's just a movie."
Yeah.
And she got really mad, and she got really hurt, and she made this whole video online. It was a whole thing. And I initially thought too, I'm like, well, dude, that's kind of a jerk move, you know? She just wanted to talk about a movie. Yeah, it's just a movie. You just listen to her talk about just a movie. But now seeing that, like, that must have come from trauma of some sort.
Had to have been, or a narcissistic personality.
Could have been.
You know, but typically, let's just go on the best side of, you know, thinking good of people.
Benefit of the doubt.
The benefit of the doubt. You know, love thinks no evil, right? Potentially that person was probably...
And I think it was trauma because even after that, you know, she said to him, you know, that really hurt my feelings, you know, and he was like, "Oh, well, you know, I'm sorry. You know, I didn't see the big deal. It was just a movie."
Yeah. For some reason, there are some things in that area that I've had to have God reactivate. Things that should be fun, like are fun to others, numb for me. Something that is funny to others, it's clean funny, nothing. It's flatline.
Wow.
No humor. There's no up or down. It's just flatline. There's no feeling in it whatsoever. I just look at it and it's, you know. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not right. So I've been open to God to restore those things. Mm-hmm. So like this morning or earlier today when you were running around with the dog, I got great joy out of watching that dog chase you. It's almost like he had a smile because it's something I'd never noticed before. Where before it was stupid dog. Mm-hmm. You know, you have people like that in a home, and dad might say, knock it off, settle down, stupid dog, quit riling the dog up. Mm-hmm. Where does that come from?
Trauma.
Why would that bother you?
Right.
Why would a joyous moment it was irritating to a guy?
Yeah. I think that's where, people got upset for a while because it would have been boomer generation, I think, or maybe it was Gen Xer, but that was where this LGBTQ stuff started to take hold a little more. The fatherlessness was more prevalent. And thinking about that could be leftover from World War II trauma.
That the boomers, I've heard that, because they didn't know what to do with the PTSD.
Mm-hmm. And that was some of the worst warfare.
Yeah, they didn't know people. So you had alcoholic dads that were absent. Abusive fathers, abusive husbands. Mm-hmm. They came out of that, and it was a result of trauma. They didn't know what to do, and that's how that. I know there are dads even now that maybe experience that themselves. There's just an absence of a father because that father had trauma. Now you don't know how to behave. You don't know how to have joy. God will restore that for you. He is He restores my soul. He restores your soul. Yeah. The soul is the mind, the will, and the emotions. It says He heals the brokenhearted. Among the brokenhearted is the ability to reason, think,
behave.
To behave in a godly manner. We are created and made in the image and the likeness of God. Think about how the Father took great joy. I have to go back and look at this. You think about Adam. God let Adam name the animals, right? Mm-hmm. He had to take great pleasure in watching Adam, his son, name that.
Yeah.
And then said, good job, that's it. Mm-hmm. That'll be its name. He let his son, he took great pleasure. There are things that as a dad, we could take great pleasure in. I'd take great pleasure in you and Riley, like your storytelling and writing the book and talking about your characters and how they're developing. I take great joy in that because I see a gift coming out. I take great joy in Riley's creativity and notice to pretty things. She doesn't just get that from her mom. There's things that are developing there in her. Like when she brought up the idea of this. Maybe I shouldn't give it away. This program,
maybe not.
This thing that she's coming up with is about this story. I see the storytelling in her that's just, wow, that's a great idea. I take great joy in that, and that's only coming from of healing of the heart. God has given me the ability to take joy and pleasure in things that are not my own.
Right.
That never happened before. It was a flat line.
Yeah. Which would make sense why it would continue down, because if you can't get pleasure from anyone else, you only find even remote pleasure from pleasing yourself. Mm-hmm. That's where this can go even further without healing.
Yeah, and that's where drug abuse and alcohol come in, because it's a false sense of joy. They talk about beer goggles.
Yeah.
It's a false way of seeing the world. It used to be that I'd have to get drunk to have fun, mm-hmm. because it let down some things, and now I can be stupid and whatever, Same thing with drugs. In order to feel good, that's when you smoked a joint, because it's the only time you had joy. It's false joy.
Yeah.
Marijuana, false joy. Wasn't there, because I didn't have it in a normal way. Mm-hmm. But He restores my soul, and He can make all things new again. That's what would be the norm. Heaven's way of doing things is normal.
Right.
That's what
the true normal.
The true normal.
You heard of the new normal. This is the true normal.
The true normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, He restores my soul. He'll restore yours too. That's just let him do it. Give him a chance. Call on him. You got things that are bugging you, even email us. We can talk with you. We can pray with you.
Yeah. rootedministries@hotmail.com.
Yes.
Hit us up.
Hit us up. Because if you share this with someone that may be relating to this, or maybe you're relating to, or maybe you've got someone you need to talk to, man, talk to me. I'll tell you what I know. Might not know everything, but I'll tell you what I've been through. I can help you as much as I can.
Yeah.
Because people need you. Mm-hmm. People need you.
And keep listening, because the point of the podcast is to equip the saints.
Equip the saints.
We are here to help you, and you to help other people.
Yep. Because this is the work of the ministry. This is the hard part of looking at, Ephesians talks about the apostle, prophet, pastor, evangelist, teacher doing this for the equipping of the saints, for the edifying of itself. I'm mixing up scriptures, but anyway, we're supposed to be, helping you to be able to help others, and that's what the goal is here. So if you need help helping someone else, let me know. We'll help you. I'll give you what we can. We don't know it all. I can just give you what I've been through.
And if you want to help us and become a Rooted partner, go to rootedministries.us. There's a donate button on the website, and you can donate once. You can donate monthly if you'd like. Help us to spread this message, because we're going to do whatever we can to help fix this generation, because they are broken and they need help. So,
amen. I said it better.
We'll see you next time.
Hey everybody, if you like this podcast, remember to share it with someone. We have new episodes every other Wednesday at 2 p.m. If you'd like to help us spread the message even further, go to rootedministries.us and click the donate button. The gospel is free, but it takes money to get it out.